On the evening of February 5th, 1933.
Ooh, this is an old one.
Yeah. 65-year-old Mary Skeele received an anonymous telephone call informing her that her husband, Walter, who was the Dean of College of Music at USC, had been in a terrible accident and now was being taken to Northside Emergency Hospital to be operated on. She was told that a car was being sent to her at her home at 136 South Avenue 55 in Highland Park to drive her to the hospital to be at her husband's side.
Oh man, this is a double misdirect of kidnapping, or just a misdirect. You confused me twice, is what I'm saying.
So she agreed to this, called her son Franklin, and informed him what happened. As she was telling him, she saw the car pull up. Soon after, a man rang Mrs. Skeele's doorbell. She followed him to the car and found a woman behind the wheel. So she got into the car and sat next to the woman, and the man got in behind her, sandwiching the 65-year-old woman between them. That's when the car drove off. But they weren't heading to the hospital. Mr. Skeele had not been in an accident. Mrs. Skeele was being kidnapped. She would learn this at the end of the block when the car turned the opposite direction of the hospital. Behind her at her home, wedged between the screen door and the door frame, was a note that read, "No tricks. Dear Sir," this is typed by the way, "Dear Sir, after due consideration and planning, we have decided to adopt your wife," in cutout words. The word wife isn't cut out.
Isn't cut out.
Is cut out.
Only the word wife is cut out?
Only the word wife is cut out from a magazine and placed there on a typed letter.
Okay. That's the 30s. People didn't know how to do that yet.
They were still learning how to handwrite calligraphy.
That word hadn't been invented yet in handwriting.
In handwriting. Until such time as you see fit to release her or take her in payment for the bill, we feel that it is not a great hardship to you, and that is the reason we are taking this means of getting the money. You no doubt consider your wife, cut out word, it's a cut off word again, is worth more, but to us, she is just another one. And although we want the money, we can easily get rid of her. So if the money is not forthcoming, we will feel that she is not worth much. So it is up to you to follow these instructions and see that she is returned. Your movements and actions will tell of the impertinence of these matters, and we will judge from this as to what course for us to follow. We have planned every move for you as well as these for ourselves, and we do not want any false ones put in. Each move of yours will be watched closely, and if you make one false move or word, it'll be just bad for yourself and wife. Cut out word.
So this is a classic situation of take my wife, please. Don't.
Yes, this is it. This is comedy gold.
I mean, I'm laughing already.
So if you want her back, please see that you do as instructed. You know others have tried to be slick and let the officers know, but they have always paid off in flowers afterwards. I love that.
I mean,
she's going to be a florist. They're taking her to horticulture school. They'll sign her and make her take classes, even though she's more into woodworking. So use your good. The word good is also cut out. Judgment and see we know.
Is this just like a trailer for The Good Wife? And this is...
You caught me.
Oh,
you caught me.
It.
The word wife and good wife is cut out.
This episode also brought to you by The Good Wife.
Yeah.
Season mystery.
Mystery, till we look it up. It is strictly up to you. $10,000 in cash or the wife, cut out word, pays the bill. This money must not be marked or the serials taken. The police or any other person must not be notified. This money must be in denominations of 5, 10, 20 bills. None of these bills to be new, meaning freshly issued from the bank.
This is a lot. Like
this is just as long as the John Benet Ramsey letter.
But this is like...
I could have done John Benet Ramsey.
You don't lay that much. Like the first note you leave is like, we've taken your wife.
Yeah.
And then later you get like, this is like the user's manual of so your wife has been kidnapped.
Yeah. This is like, we got to use a dime to call them later. Let's just put all the information in one note. It's more cost effective. Yeah. It's more cost effective that way.
And those words are cut out.
Place this money in the box for delivery. No dummy packages go. We will hold her until we know that you have released these instructions. If we see or hear or notice anyone else in this case besides you alone, we will consider that you have failed to meet our requirements and we will follow our own course. Oh, I love this. Be very careful and all will be okay. Otherwise, things will be KO. That's some solid wordplay. We do not want any delay in this matter, and we are giving you just enough time to do these things. So use every moment and see that you are on time or else that you follow this. They wrote it weird. It's not me. Follow every move and word.
This is word for word.
Yeah, word for word, because they're kind of loony. Follow every move and word as directed herein. We will accept no excuses or any false moves. You will be protected for this delivery of money, but we also warn you that there should be no monkey business.
This note is still... I would have stopped reading 10 pages ago.
This is literally... It's printed on the Star Wars scroll. in the crawl in the opening credits.
There's a projector in front of their front lawn.
What's that word is getting small? I lost it.
A long time ago in the year 1933.
Please govern yourself accordingly.
Is that still going?
That's the end of the note.
The end. That's probably what he said.
Is that the end?
Where's the... it didn't stick the landing, really.
Chapter 2. God damn it.
He goes to his neighbor who's also been kidnapped. He has the rest.
Halfway through, though, he treats himself to a little snack. Just treat yourself.
Intermission,
yeah.
Yeah, that's what it said at the end of the intermission.
Make sure to drink water.
A rock will be flying through your window in about 15 minutes.
Her son Franklin got in his car and sped to the hospital, only to find that no patient fitting his father's description had been admitted. He then called the family's church, where his father answered the phone. And there, the two of them became suspicious that something had gone amiss and called the police to meet them at their home, where both parties found the ransom note demanding $10,000 by 5:30 the following day at the designated spot on Montecito Drive in Highland Park, or else Mrs. Skeele would die a painful death.
Do you know what spot it is exactly?
I have the address, but I looked it up and I have to drive up there. I don't know.
Because I have a spot also that I went to great lengths.
Really?
I want to know exactly where the spot is.
Yeah.
But are we going to get an answer of why they cut out those words?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Upon a further investigation, the police learned that Dr. Skeele's name on the ransom note had come from a page in the College of Music yearbook, which had been mailed to a limited number of subscribers the previous week. The kidnappers are someone familiar with the professor through the school. Mrs. Skeele herself had been active in campus affairs and was possibly known to her abductors. What police would later learn is that Mrs. Skeele was not the original target. Okay. So to this, we're going to cut to Isabel Smith of Pasadena. On January 27th, which was, a week before? Yeah, a week before, which is today's date.
Today,
wow, I didn't notice that. Wow.
It's, also,
a spicy meatball?
There's something at the door. Could you...
do you mind getting it real quick? Your car's been in a terrible accident.
Somebody knocked all the basil growing in the back of your truck all over the floor.
It's mint, and the raccoons ate it already, and it's fall.
You're going to have to go to Osh. I was going to say Kosh Bagage, but I realized the place is just called Osh. Osh cost a losh. That's what I was trying to say.
So on January 27th, which is 101 years ago today.
That is crazy. Wait.
No.
1933?
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Okay. 90. It's 2034 right now.
2034, yeah. Sorry. 91 years ago. I don't know how to do math.
Let's just say it's 2033 and say it's around 100 years ago.
It'll always be 2033 in my heart. You're right. Sorry. I'm an idiot. It's 91 years ago.
Right.
On
That's
January,
so weird.
The kidnappers had tried to abduct another woman, the daughter of a prominent Pasadena family. Her name, like I said, was Isabel Smith. First calling her over the phone saying, "Hi, this is Mr. Johnson from the church. We're planning on a surprise party for your mother and father, and we're putting together the committee meeting tonight, and we want you there. We'll pick you up later." And she was like, "No, thank you. Not until you can prove who you are." So around 7 p.m., a mustachioed Mr. Johnson, quote unquote, arrived at her home, where he was greeted by the aunt, Mrs. Smith's aunt. Mrs. Wolf, that's what it is. And since he was there in the flesh, Isabel Smith and her aunt, Miss Wolf, decided to go with this strange man. He led them outside to a parked car where there was a woman in the driver's seat. The woman asked, "Is that Mrs. Johnson?" And the man said yes, as the woman hid her face in the fur of her jacket. It was wet out, somewhere between misty and drizzling, and the moisture loosened the grip of the man's fake mustache just as he opened the backseat for the ladies. The woman called him out on it and returned inside the seat as the car sped away.
Oh my God.
So at this point, you realize that these people aren't very good at what they're doing.
So wait, this wasn't the same night. This was a different
This was
night.
a week earlier.
Okay. I mean, we've all had that happen to us when we're trying to abduct somebody and our fake mustache comes off.
It's a human experience. It's a universal mistake. Folly. It's a universal folly. So the woman called the police, and police suspected that this was a plan made and followed through by a gang, which someone involved with a church or university, or possibly both. The Skeels and the Smith both knew each other. The paper said that they were close friends and they ran in the same circles. Same church, same university. So who's trying to abduct Miss Smith and took Miss Skeele is someone in this realm.
Don't they say that usually an abduction, a kidnapping is done by somebody you're familiar with or something, or someone in your...
More than likely someone that you're familiar with and you know.
Well, interesting.
Interesting. Huh. I think she kidnapped herself. Even more interesting was that Isabel Smith was once a student of Walter Skeele.
Okay.
It was clear after hearing this and looking at the note that Isabel Smith was the first target after the job was botched. They did a second draft on the ransom note, pasting the word "wife" in large font to cover up the words "your daughter, girl, or child."
That's pretty funny.
I'm going to type this stuff again.
Wait, so they just like peeled the words off and saw that, or like had that's how
they wondered, like you wondered why the word wife was the only one pasted, so they peeled one of them up and was like, oh, this is a second draft. Oh, they meant to take
they also went to, in case it was a son, they went to Boys Life magazine just in case. All of the copies of
bridal gowns were followed through.
All of the copies of Ant Monthly were gone all over the city. Who bought them all?
Oh, I ordered the wrong Ant Monthly. This one's about bugs. I meant Aunt.
Ant Monthly, brought to you by National Geographic.
It's only for the articles, Mom. By the next day, police investigators began poking around trying to figure out who the man and woman were and who they were to the Skeels safely before the 5:30 drop-off. They wanted to try to figure it out before 5:30. All they had was the instructions from the kidnappers. Follow a certain route to a hill atop Montecito Drive, and there deposit a box containing $10,000 ransom. Put the money in that box, placing the box beneath a tile at the end of a retaining wall. That's all they had to go on, was these instructions.
Okay.
And that they were in the same realm as that. But later the next day, before 5:30,
this is January 28th.
This is February 6th.
Oh, okay.
Wait. At 5:30, go ahead.
Wait, so what happened January 27th?
They tried to abduct.
The wrong kidnapping happened.
The first kidnapping happened. The mustache fell off in the rain. They bailed.
Oh, I thought that the wife kidnapping happened on January 27th.
No.
Then why are we celebrating? We're celebrating a failed kidnapping?
It all starts at the fake.
Talk to me again on February 5th, okay?
So on February 6th, 5:30 is when the ransom is due. Montecito Drive on a hilltop on a tile at the retaining wall. Later the next day, though, before 5:30, the doorbell rang. Franklin answered it, and it was Mary Skeele, returned safely except for some scratches and trauma.
You got a little trauma on you.
Wipe that trauma off.
Wait, so the money hadn't been dropped yet? Okay.
It was much earlier than 5:30.
Okay. I thought you said it was 4:30.
It could have been 4:30. I don't actually know what time she made it back home.
I was thinking that's cutting it pretty. If I have a 5:30 deadline for a ransom, I'm probably going at like 5.
Yeah.
I'm getting it done early. Just in case something in case she escapes.
I'll be ready by 2. And there'll be a lot of sitting around.
Yeah. I just don't want to get caught in traffic on the way to my ransom drop off.
I don't want to get too involved with a movie and then miss it. So what happened?
You tell me.
Let's go backtrack to the day before.
These dates, you're confusing me. Okay, so we're back to February 5th.
Yes.
Okay, I've got my timeline straight.
So Mrs. Skeele gets in the car and they make it to the end of the block. That's kind of where we left off.
Right.
The car went west instead of east, and Mrs. Skeele gets concerned and starts asking questions. Her abductors are quiet, so she gets more worked up until it becomes clear that something isn't right. So she starts screaming, and the man puts his hand over her mouth. She starts fighting back, so he gags the 65-year-old woman and throws a blanket over her head with the threat of chloroform, finally forcing her to calm down. I don't know how she did this because she was in the middle, which is weird. But she says that at some point she felt the door handle, so when they came to a stop, she tried to jump out of the car.
Maybe she was like reaching over.
Maybe, but like the guy's
like
me. Yeah. Maybe he's like leaned so far forward and she's like, I'm going to put my arm around you, pal.
Oh, that old trick.
Yeah. But she made it like 1 foot out the door, like 1 foot planted on the ground, but they pulled her back in.
This is a flexible 65-year-old lady.
She's limber. If she could, if they sandwiched her in, which I remember hearing that's how they did it, which makes sense. If I'm kidnapping someone, I'm not going to let them sit at the door.
You got to go with the sandwich.
You got to sandwich this lady in.
Well, I usually let them drive.
I don't know where I'm going. After that, it kind of ate up all her energy, so she kind of just sat still. She was taken to a house first, entering the rear door, but they seemed to change their mind and walk back to the car, forcing her in again and then continue on. They drove for about an hour, and they arrived at another house and entered where 3 men were waiting. About 10 minutes into being there, she heard the clock strike 10 o'clock. So it is 2 hours later after she's been abducted. She got abducted about a little after 8.
Okay, 8 p.m. February 5th. It is now 10 p.m. February 5th.
You are dragnetting this up. The date is February 5th. The time?
Bloop. All brought to you by Dragnet.
Just a love, man. Is that good? Do you like that?
Just a peck on the cheek, man.
She then had her hands and feet tied up, her mouth gagged, and cotton stuffed in her ears to keep her from hearing anything. Although that didn't really work, she can still hear a lot.
Yeah, but have you had cotton stuff? Like that sounds like...
It doesn't do anything.
No.
My ears will just absorb it. The earwax will soak it up.
I know. That's going to turn into cotton rubber balls by the time we're
going to solidify.
Ears.
She could hear people talking, whispering. She heard a train in the distance, and she also heard the clicking of a revolver for more than an hour as someone was just mindlessly snapping the hammer on the empty cylinder. Terrifying. I would be terrified if I knew what that sound was.
Playing Russian roulette, the world's longest game of Russian roulette.
Exactly. But truly,
we forgot to load it.
Crap. We've been playing this for 2 hours. We've gone through 36 chambers and we're all still alive. But truly, they never intimidated her, never talked about ransom as far as she could hear. She was kidnapped and that scared her. But other than the scratches on her face from her escape attempt, no harm was inflicted on her. And they never made any threats that they were going to hurt her. When they took her gag out, she screamed, so they obviously had to put it back in. But when she was able to remark to her captors that she was exhausted and scared, the woman who was at the wheel led her to the bedroom and allowed her to rest after throwing her onto the bed. I kept picturing her like walking her up very calmly, and then I read, and then it threw her onto the bed,
dragging her by the hair. Okay, you can rest now.
Rest now, or I'll beat you up. I guess at some point, this is weird. This is not a well-known case, so there's no like ABC of the story. I read it all in old newspaper articles, so it's kind of all over the place. But it seemed that at some point she complained about being ill, so the kidnappers brought a physician in to see her.
What? Yeah. What happened in the 30s?
I don't know. It's just a crooked, like in Better Call Saul, like they brought a vet in.
They brought the traveling veterinarian came in.
She's got rabies. In the morning, she was given a light breakfast of toast and coffee, and later got lunch. At breakfast, they told her that they would return her home so long as she didn't make a rumpus or relate any of the experiences to her husband or the authorities. So by morning, they've already been like, okay, we're going to just take you home. And Mary was like, okie dokie. And then, so the day passed, and later 2 men blindfolded her, led her to the car.
Spun her around
50 times, and then she had to pin the tail on the
donkey. Pin the tail on the captor.
Yeah. After about an hour's drive, took her to Avenue 50 in Figueroa in Highland Park, which was walking distance to their home. This was shortly before 8 p.m. And they took her blindfold and drove away. And she hadn't seen anything in maybe like 12 hours or something.
But what? Like what?
I'll get to it.
Okay.
So she walked home. At home, she found her incredibly relieved husband and son along with the police investigators. And at first thought they asked her questions and they thought her story was incomplete. I don't know how much of that was her wanting to follow the captor's wishes because they had let her go. So maybe like in exchange.
I think you're recapping the recent season of Fargo.
Oh, a lot of this came from a dream.
A dream I had after watching Fargo.
Fargo, yeah.
After I binge watched season 5 of Fargo.
Which was perfect, by the way. Maybe the best season of Fargo so far. And I love that show.
Which of these characters had nipple rings, though? Tell me now.
So Mrs. Skeele took her shirt off, and you wouldn't believe it. They found her story incomplete. They couldn't tell, maybe she was hesitant to speak about them because they had let her go. Or maybe it was like, I had just walked home from a traumatic event. Please give me like some time to process it. They didn't know. So police took her coat, shoes, and hat for evidence. Because it was such a good hat. The police themselves had been busy, and they had not, in the meantime, since she was gone, had not frittered the hours away. Somewhere in the note, I know not where, there was a mention in the instructions to leave the money somewhere on Montecito Drive in Highland Park. So the cops started hanging around there, probing the site where the handoff was supposed to take place. They found 6 suspicious characters hanging around and questioned them, but they could all prove that they didn't do anything, so they let them walk. And that's when they found the pasteboard carton, the box that they were supposed to leave the money in, as the instructions indicated. And inside they found the tile and another note. Walk to your left across the street to the bank, like the Bank of the Hill. Here will be
that's where I got my loans from, Bank of the Hill.
You're too far to hit, but I'm thinking about it. You're worth getting up and hitting.
That's why I got you one of those Looney Tunes punch guns.
It's a trigger and a boxing glove. Here will be a box in a hole in bank with final instructions. We like tricks, but we prefer to keep them out of business.
What?
We like tricks, but we prefer to keep them out of business. Meaning we like tricks too, but we like it when we're doing the tricks.
They said this in a note. Why are they so playful and like flowery with their language?
No idea.
What happened in the days of give money? Now,
money.
Kid dead.
Yeah. Kid dead? Question mark? You like dead kid? Question mark?
Son, ear, here.
A notice bag? So the officers continued about 75 feet away, found a Cracker Jack box with another note.
Oh my God.
Tie packaged thoroughly so this ends of string and go on. This note had been weighed down by a small stone.
Ignore person tugging string.
Name, Ishmael.
These people, it's like a Rube Goldberg of ransom deposit.
This note had been weighed down by a small stone which had been attached to a string. So the cops, of course, followed the string down the embankment to the lower side of the winding road.
They pull it and then like 5 kidnappers.
5 guys fall out of a tree. Geez, boss. But it led nowhere except a place where the kidnappers, like a bush where the kidnappers were going to wait. They weren't there, so the cops decided to stake out instead. But who's staking the stake out? Because the kidnappers were watching the cops snoop around the spot, and just as the cops were saying, oh yeah, we don't know anything, the kidnappers were watching cops and thinking, oh no, they know everything.
And then they turned around.
Yeah.
And the watchmen
And
were
Mrs.
there.
Skeele was like, oh no, they know everything too. It was at this point that the kidnappers decided to just bail on the scheme altogether. The cops, they know too much already because they found the spot that we told them to go to the spot to.
Wait, so, okay, I want my Dragnet timeline again on this.
Okay.
So this is after she had already come home?
No,
Or
I'm
this was
backtracking
during?
once again.
Okay, so we've got several timelines going here.
Sorry. I wanted to make this as mysterious as possible.
I wanted to Christopher Nolan this up a little bit.
Yeah, enough.
Wait, which parts of this are in black and white?
True Detective season 3, we don't know what timeline you're in sometimes.
It's more like True Detective season 2. Great and perfect.
Does Greg have hair or is he bald? That's how we could tell the timelines apart. Is he fat and bald or kind of skinny and bald?
Does he have the nipple piercings yet or not?
Oh, it's just a butt piercing that closes the hole. So the kidnappers see the cops snooping around the spot where they told them to go to, which is so stupid. And they're like, we got to let her go. This is when they approach Mrs. Skeele, and that's when they let her know after probably around lunch or breakfast, they're going to let her go. Don't squeal on us and our awful plan.
So that sounds like fun wordplay that they're up to. Mrs. Skeele, don't squeal.
That's good. See that if they had calmed down a little bit, they could have knocked that one out. So they sent her home that night, but police knew this spot could not be so random because there were houses nearby. Why not go to an abandoned lot on the outskirts of town, an industrial area where there's no loose eyes around? This hilltop on Montecito Drive was something. So police started probing the area and talking to neighbors, and many witnesses in the area reported 2 residents acting suspiciously, which led to the home of Luella Pearl Hammer of 1195 Montecito Drive. Police started questioning her, and they found a slip of paper in her purse. By the way, where's your warrant? They found a slip of paper that was
30s.
They found a slip of paper.
What's a warrant?
They found a slip of paper that was not a search warrant that read, Mrs. Skeele, Miss Smith, Dr. Skeele, Franklin Skeele. When asked about this, the woman explained she wrote the names down after reading an account in the newspaper about the kidnapping. But Isabel Smith had not been in the paper. That story had not made its way into the newspaper at that point, maybe because no one even suspected there was a connection yet. She was brought to Highland Park Police Station where they interrogated her, and at that point, they wrangled up her boyfriend, ex-con E.H. Dorn, who was identified by Mrs. Skeele as her abductor. The boyfriend was the abductor. Luella Hammer had been a former student of Dean Skeele's at USC, which is why she had the yearbook, which is how she cut his name out, which is how she knew the Skeels. It was then that they found out that Luella also had another home in Pasadena, 623 Buckeye Street, 4 blocks from Isabel Smith's house. This was the second house. This one on Buckeye Street was where Mrs. Skeele was taken and held with evidence of her imprisonment all over the place, including pieces of string of beads that Mrs. Skeele wore, the tone of the chimes in the mantle that Mrs. Skeele could identify by sound because the cotton was nothing, and the texture of the...
And a room full of cotton balls.
And a photo of her that also had the address and a newspaper. No, the texture of a pair of lace window curtains that she could point out and remember. And also, Mrs. Skeele's fingerprints were on a soup can. The house is also 2 miles. The house is also 2 miles from the Santa Fe Railroad. Mm. Neighbors who also refer to Luella Hammer as the quote-unquote mystery woman of the neighborhood had mentioned that for the last 2 weeks, the blinds have been drawn and lights were only visible on the rear part of the house. Luella Hammer had nothing left to do but confess.
But why? Are we going to get to the why?
There really isn't one.
Just money?
Money. With that, the 2 were arrested for kidnapping Mrs. Skeele with the hopes of getting a measly $10,000.
For what? They didn't even,
They were just poor in the 30s, in the beginning of the Depression. They just needed money. So they were like, who's rich and can afford it?
But so they originally wanted this daughter.
The daughter of a prominent family in Pasadena.
And then when that didn't work out, they said, well, how about my old music professor's wife?
Yeah.
So they were just going through like people they knew who they thought had money in the past.
And who they can take and who would be probably a weak target. They can't overpower us. This 20-something-year-old girl, this 65-year-old woman, they can't overpower us. We can keep them, and we're not going to hurt them. They didn't hurt Mrs. Skeele.
The only thing that can overpower me is my spirit gum mustache.
The only thing that overpower me is the sight of the cops whittling away. E.H. Dorn tried to let his sweetheart off the hook and take the blame, saying that she was too ill to participate. But Mrs. Skeele and Mrs. Smith both pointed out her as the driver of the car, a Chevy Coupe, plus her fingerprints were on the same soup can as Mrs. Skeele. Well, that's sloppy police work because it's her can. Of course, her fingerprints are going to be on it. Luella Hammer tried to plead insanity, and from many reports of her behavior in the courtroom, she seemed mentally ill. Like she was raising her hands above her head. She was just cackling at some things.
Or was she?
She was, but it didn't fly in the courtroom. The insanity plea did not go over. She was seen as sane. E.H. Jordan was sentenced to 10 years to life. I don't know how much time he served. She was sent to San Quentin for a similar sentence, but later was moved to the Mendocino State Hospital for the insane.
That sounds delicious.
She lived until 1990, and she was hospitalized for the rest of her life.
Oh, she was alive when we were alive.
Yeah.
Wow.
2 years after her abduction.
Oh, well, not me. Maybe you were alive. I was born in like 2020.
It's terrifying meeting people who were born in 2002. And they're like adults who talk to me. They're not like little kids watching Bluey. They drive me to work.
They still say things to me. They keep asking me to tie their shoelaces and wipe their dirty little butts. What does that mean?
Wipe their stinky caca butts?
Is that a TikTok thing?
I don't remember that from the 90s. And 2 years after his wife's abduction, Mr. Skeele died of heart disease. And that's the end of the story.